ladies and gentlemen. Thank you. That's such a flattering introduction. I thought we must be expecting somebody else, but I will do my best to live up to the billing and to follow two people I enormously admire. Ruth has been a pin-up in the Rees-Mogg household since my father and I used to watch her on Newsnight, when she was the only person who had the courage to talk any sense on the exchange rate mechanism now some years ago. And she has carried on and on talking sense, and how lucky we are to have her on our side in this great debate. And I must confess, I'm terrified to be on the same platform as John, because he does what MPs ought to do, whereas I'm one of those crawly, sycophantic types who mainly votes with the whips. John invariably votes with his conscience, as he should, and I'm sometimes shamefacedly supporting the government, but on the big issues we're very much on the same side, and I'm very, very glad to be on the same side as him in this, because he's been so important in getting us to where we want to be. But ladies and gentlemen, ultimately, it's down to you. In 1997, a book was published on how Labour won the landslide that it won. And at that point, the greatest advocates for Tony Blair weren't the newspapers, wasn't the Sun what won it, wasn't even the BBC. It was individual voters who went round saying, I'm voting Labour, shouldn't you? That is your task in the next few months. That in 1997, 35% of Labour voters went round saying that, compared to 3% of Conservative voters who went round saying that they were Conservatives and they thought their friends should follow. So what I'm charging you with is not just listening, but doing. And not necessarily doing in the thousands or in the hundreds of thousands, but that every time you have an opportunity, be bold and state proudly your Euroscepticism, because until recently, it hasn't been polite dinner party conversation. I have a nasty feeling in Notting Hill and Islington it still isn't polite dinner party conversation, but we're more civilised than that. We're in St James's, and in St James's it is now the dinner party conversation of the moment. But it is so important that we all press this message whenever we can, so that it doesn't become a group talking in amongst itself, but becomes a message that is spread across the nation at large. Because I know this much, I see it in the House of Commons, that very, very few of those who are in favour of Remain actually want to talk about it at all. Whereas those of us who want to leave do so with passion and enthusiasm and energy. And those who want to remain look carefully into their red boxes and hope that a mouse won't run out. But beyond that, they avoid the subject. They put French cheese in their mouse traps, but that's about the extent of it. And so, we have this great vote coming up on the 23rd of June. Unfortunately timed when there's a match at Lord's between Somerset and Middlesex, so I am torn as to whether to tend to my cricketing desires or my countrywide duty. You can guess which I will do. I shall sacrifice Somerset cricket for once. But there is a clear vote. No, I won't get a postal vote because I want to be knocking on doors and getting people out and encouraging everybody, and I thought if I was sitting enjoying myself at Lord's, some of my friends might notice and comment and say, that's not quite the spirit we expect. I can't tell all of you to do the work and then go swanning off to the cricket, can I? That won't do. But on the 23rd of June, you have a very clear choice. A very, very clear choice. You will vote, and everyone in this country will vote to decide what the name of their nation is. Either the name of that nation is Europe, or the name of that nation is the United Kingdom. And I know those who are for remaining try to pretend we've got a special status. And I thought of talking about the renegotiation this evening, but as the chairman so rightly put it, it was thin gruel, and therefore it's drifted out of the debate altogether. It was meant to be this triumphant renegotiation, the triumphant change that Europe needed, the fundamental change that Europe needed. But now, who mentions it? Does the Downing Street cat remember what was in the renegotiation? It has passed from the annals of history. It is of no relevance or significance, so why should I bother talking about it? So let's just think about that nation that is Europe. because we're already in it. Look, see what's happening. They have the symbols of nationhood. They have the flag that you see flying whenever there's a statement from France. The French president gives equal standing to the European flag as he does to his own French flag. The German Chancellor does the same. Only the British Prime Minister tries to poke it into a corner when he's in Brussels speaking, but it's still there. And that is so symbolically important. It is like those state capitals in the United States, where they may have their proud state flag, but flying in pride of place is the stars and stripes of the United States. So the symbolism is there, but it's deeper than that. They've purloined a great tune and they call it a national anthem. But it's not a national anthem unless it's a nation. How many of you would stand for Beethoven's Ninth Symphony? I don't suppose any of you much would now, but it doesn't mean it's not a great tune, but it's a claim to statehood. They have the other symbols of statehood. They have a parliament, which they like to have meeting in two places. That's a separate question. And they have not just one, but 5 presidents to assert the stateliness of this endeavour. So all the symbolism is there. But symbolism isn't everything. You can have symbolism sometimes without the underlying reality. It was said of the Holy Roman Empire that there were 3 things wrong with it. It wasn't holy, it wasn't Roman, it wasn't an empire. So sometimes, like Churchill's comment that you will all know when he became Lord Privy Seal. He said he wasn't a lord, he wasn't a privy, and he wasn't a seal. So you can sometimes have symbolism without the underlying reality, but in the case of the European Union, the underlying reality is also there. European law is our law. It is our superior law. It determines what happens in this country in a vast swathe of areas, and by the 1972 European Communities Act, a judgment of the Court of Justice of the European Union is the highest law in the land and overrules Parliament. And this is in areas that are very important to our daily lives. We know about agriculture, we know about fishing, we know about trade. All our trade agreements have to be done through the European Union. It is illegal for us to do a trade agreement without having it agreed by the European Union. Health and safety, working time directives, on and on it goes. When you look into competencies and then into shared competencies, the European Union even has interests now in sport. For heaven's sake, I think they're not going to nationalise the English cricket team. That would be most unsatisfactory. But the European Union has taken those powers as a state to influence our lives. And what it does as a state, it does terrifyingly badly. The European Union has fewer trade agreements than Chile. Well, Chile quite likes free trade. The European Union does not. Look at TTIP. Or don't look at TTIP, depending on your preference. TTIP excludes financial services. Quite important, the UK, financial services. Why does it exclude financial services? Well, there are a number of rumours. It's all very secret. We're not allowed to know the real reason. But there are a number of rumours. One is, of course, that the Americans don't want to have free trade in financial services with the Greeks. This is not a question of I fear the Greeks even when they bear gifts. It's a question of I fear Greek banks when they say they've got any assets. And would you, if you were an American official, want to have automatic access to your market for Greek banks, Portuguese banks, Spanish banks, French banks, quite honestly? I don't want to go down there, and maybe French people in the audience, and I don't want to offend them. So that's excluded to our disadvantage. But another reason it's supposed to be excluded is because one thing very important in terms of free trade to the Americans is the film industry. Hollywood's a very big export earner for the US. But the French won't put in the film industry because they're worried about those dirty French films they like making. And they need to subsidise because proper people don't watch them. They're watched by teenagers, I think, who get excited by that sort of thing. But because the French have excluded that in retaliation, the Americans are not keen on financial services, hugely to our disadvantage. Whereas South Korea and Singapore and so on, they've had a free trade agreement with the US for years. So it does badly on trade. What about agriculture? I know here I am in St James's, and it's some years since there were farms around here. But agriculture is still an important part of our nation, and yet the European Union discriminates against British farmers. If you come to my constituency, do come to North East Somerset. It's a great place to visit. It's the finest part of this great country. But there, over the last years, and since I've grown up there, the number of dairy farmers has gone down to about a quarter of what it was. The farms have consolidated. Just as much milk is produced, but the consolidation has been painful. It has transformed the business expectations of farmers in the UK, and it's not just in dairy, it's in all these industries, that the small 60-acre farms have all gone. On the continent, that hasn't happened. So how do they work out the subsidies? I sat on one of these European committee debates. I was arguing against the then Liberal Democrat agriculture MP, David Heath, who represented an agricultural seat next door to mine. We were entirely on the same side because our hard-working farmers who made the effort to restructure were going to be penalised, have money taken from them to encourage inefficiency, to encourage farmers who hadn't bothered to modernise, hadn't bothered to make the effort to improve themselves. So CAP has been a disaster. The wine lakes may have gone, the butter mountains, the milk lakes, but still it encourages idleness and inefficiency, and what we want is efficiency and competitiveness. But what about the common fisheries policy? I don't know if any of you fish, but if you wanted to catch a sea bass, that would be illegal. You might have to go to prison and eat bread and water rather than fish. Maybe some joke in loaves and fishes that you would wish to make. I can't think of one immediately, but there may be. And that would be illegal because of the European Union, and it's illegal because the European Union has destroyed our fishing stocks. And that is a disgrace. It's destroyed them because it made them a common resource. And the common resource was then destroyed. And then what about the bits we're not in? John mentioned this. But it is worth reiterating. The euro has been a brutal scheme. It has destroyed lives and livelihoods. I went to Greece to see what had happened. And the destruction wrought by getting Greece into a system that they knew Greece wasn't entitled to get into for purely political reasons, and then destroying their enterprise, crushing them. The heavy burden insisted upon by Brussels has led to unemployment of 50%, of destruction of industries, of pensioners unable to feed themselves because their pensions had to be scrapped by order of Mrs. Merkel, essentially. And then they voted in a government that wasn't going to do it. The government that rebelled, the brave, plucky Greeks rebelled against the yoke from Brussels. And what happened? The government was dismissed. Gone. Finance director, gone. Until the Prime Minister was made to crawl and do what he was told by the boys in Brussels. How disgraceful is that? How contemptuous of democracy is this state that is created in Europe? And that's before I get on to migration. It may be a great idea to get rid of all the borders. It may be splendid, and it may make us all feel European. Anyone here feel European, just out of interest, rather than British? No brave soul? No. We're very reassuring. I try this line on Conservative associations as well, and I find occasionally there's one person who bravely puts her hand up, and then turns out to be even more Eurosceptic, but just happened to be born in Germany, or something like that. But this project to get rid of borders has left the continent of Europe as a free-for-all. But this is disastrous. It's been so cruel to people's lives. This isn't some political point about I don't like the Schengen zone or that I want to live in Fortress Britain. It's that actually I think David Cameron has got it right. The thing to do when there is a migration crisis, when there is a civil war, when there is famine and disaster, is to move food and safety to where the people are, not move the people dangerously to where the safety may not be. What Europe has done, what Mrs. Merkel particularly bears heavy responsibility for, has encouraged people to make perilous journeys which have killed them, and their families, and their children. And that's the European Union that stands up as so moral and righteous and believes in human rights so much that at one point in the Mediterranean it wouldn't rescue people from drowning, because if they were rescued, their human right meant that they had to become a European citizen. What sort of perversion of human rights is that you would rather take away the rescue boats than allow people to benefit from some arbitrary right that you had given to them? And how right we have been to take people from Syria directly, not those who have passed through the hands of criminals and have been encouraged to take dangerous trips. So the EU is a state, but it is a failed state. And its answer whenever it fails is more of the same. So when its immigration policy is a disaster, what does it say? It says, well, let's make the border Turkey. Let's send out our own officials to process people coming into Greece. Let's make that a European power. With monetary union, they say, well, let's take fiscal union too. Let's decide what will happen in the Greek economy from Frankfurt. So they override democracy, they have more of the same, and it fails more. It is a failing state which we need to leave. And on the 23rd of June, when you vote instead for Britain, for the United Kingdom, to be a free country, what prospects open up? The single market. We're told the single market has made us prosperous. Why is it then that the US has grown its trade with the European Union faster since we've been members of the European Union than we have? I was unaware that even Barack Obama, funny fellow that he is, had signed up. I'm looking forward to his visit. Had signed up to the single market. I mean, he may betray American interests, but he hasn't gone that far. China. Well, I was unaware that the Working Time Directive or the Working at Heights Directive or any of those had immediately applied in Chinese factories to allow them to export all those many goods that they export in such vast quantities with a large surplus to the European Union. So if we're out of the single market, we are freed from the regulations that hold us back within the single market. And that we know that regulation destroys enterprise and undermines trade. In my own business, in investment management, the AIFMD was estimated to have cost £1.5 billion, $300,000, and I'm sorry to switch currencies, per investment management company to implement. Wasted money, dead money, money that wasn't doing anything productive. So free from that, we can become so much more prosperous and successful internally for the 95% of businesses that never sell anything to the European Union. Most businesses aren't trading, they are domestic businesses, but yet they are tied down by these crazy regulations. But we can deal with the rest of the world. We can do free trade deals in the way that Chile has done. And I'm a one-way free trader. If the French want to subsidise electricity for us, that's great. Let's get cheap electricity paid for by the French taxpayer. If the Germans want to give us free cars, even better. Let's have German free cars. Not worry about it. Because consumers always benefit from free trade, and then they have their disposable income to spend on other things, creating new businesses in this country. The EU is not free trade, it is a customs union, it is managed trade. So outside it, let 1,000 flowers bloom, because they will. Even in the English climate, they will bloom. Possibly even in the Scottish climate, even in the Shetland Islands, thousands of flowers will bloom. And that's the opportunity. It's an outward-looking, a forward-looking opportunity for us. It's realising that it's the rest of the world that matters. It's not this narrow European focus. We may be accused of being little Englanders, but how far that is from the truth. Europe is the past. It was important in the 19th and in the 20th centuries. It is of failing importance. It is a project that is sclerotic and does not work. The United Kingdom wants to release itself from that, unshackle itself from the corpse, be free to trade with the rest of the world, free to set our regulations for what we need, free to do deals with India and China and Brazil, to look beyond the narrow horizon. And you, ladies and gentlemen, are the ones who are going to persuade people to do this. However many speeches I make, I cannot meet as many people as you can meet day by day. You have about 3 months to do it. If every day you make it your policy to seek one person out and persuade that one person to come off the fence and to support Brexit, then we will win. Every time you take a taxi, talk to your taxi driver, persuade him or her to go. Most of them pretty much on side already, but work. Certainly the ones who take me to the House of Parliament are. Don't talk to them about cycle lanes. Talk to them about Brexit. And as you do this, day by day, we are building up an unstoppable momentum. It may be funny for me to attack the elite. I was probably born into the elite, and I don't deny it, and I'm jolly lucky that I was. But the European Union is the project of the elite, and we, the people, must challenge it and must stop it. And you must do your bit too, and you have this short time to do it. But it's so exciting, because if we win, we are free, and the destiny of our country is in our own hands. That is irresistible.